Welcome to the Own It Powercast, the place to be when you get serious about making big changes and accelerating growth in your life and in your relationships. Finally create the life you've always wanted, living life on your own terms. Learn how to take your fear and turn it into powerful choices that will create sustained change. Now your host, Mary Baker.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Own It Powercast, the place to come to get what you need to move yourself forward. Hey, it's Mary Baker and welcome to episode 332, How We Teach Ourselves What We're Worth. Well, welcome to our Summer Review series. And over the next few months, we're going to be exploring something that I think quietly influences every area of our lives. And that is the relationship we have with ourselves. Now, many of us spend years focused on improving relationships with other people, but how often do we stop to consider what it's like to live with ourselves day in and day out? Do we really trust ourselves? Do we listen to ourselves? Do we treat ourselves with kindness, honesty, and respect? And like we talk about on this podcast in general, the quality of that relationship, I think, shapes our confidence, our choices, our boundaries, and even our ability to, I think, live authentically. Now, last week, if you were here, we talked about self-trust, and we revisited an old episode on that. And I put that in the newsletter. If you don't get the newsletter, reach out because it's got a lot of good stuff in it every week. So we talked about self-trust, which, again, is the foundation of any healthy relationship. And this week, we're going to be building on that foundation by exploring another important aspect, and that is self-respect. Now, self-respect is one of those things that sounds important, and none of us would say we don't want it or need it. But many people struggle to define what it actually looks like in everyday life. I mean, it's really easy to think of self-respect as just a feeling, but I think it shows up in something much more practical. I think it shows up in the choices that we make, the standards that we hold, the values that we're either living out or not. And a big one we don't talk about enough is it shows up in the way we treat ourselves when life gets difficult. So let's talk about what I think self-respect really is and why so many of us struggle with it. And then how it impacts the relationship we have with ourselves. And before we get into that, make sure you check out the show notes because I have some great offerings. Make sure you check out the show notes because there are some great offerings there. There's some mini courses that you can do that are affordable. There's my main course, Find Your Voice, which has group coaching in there. That's affordable with a payment plan. I know money's tight for a lot of you guys right now, and I understand it. And I don't want that to get in the way of you growing and having the life that you want. And if you can't afford a coach one-on-one right now, the group is an awesome way to do that because it's a much more economical way to get all of the accountability and support. And I think you get more than one-on-one with a coach. I just think there's more value to it. If any questions about that, reach out. Let me know. So, like I mentioned a moment ago, most of us think of self-respect as a feeling, but it's not just that. I think self-respect is something we demonstrate through our actions. And so I'm going to be listing some things today, and I want you just to notice what still resonates with you. Maybe some things, pat yourself on the back because you have worked on them and that feels better, and some things that you didn't even think about. Just know that whatever is coming up and resonating is meant to. So, if it's demonstrated through our actions, how is it revealed? And most of this is common sense and you guys know it, but I want you to really look at your life and ask yourself, does this really show that I know it? Now, the biggest one is what we tolerate. And I saw a video this morning on social, and she was saying, we have really lowered the bar sometimes for our relationships to normalizing what is so basic and calling that enough. Like someone texting you back or someone being kind. And her point was well taken because she's right. Have we lowered our standards? And we don't need to do that. We need to raise them, not put up walls, but healthy membranes. So what do we tolerate? It's revealed in what we allow, both for ourselves to do and what we allow in our life, what we say yes to, what we say no to, our self-talk, how we speak to ourselves, and guys, how you describe yourselves to other people. Self-deprecation is not the same as humility. I think we should have humility, but I think tearing ourselves down in front of people lowers us and makes them feel uncomfortable. And then finally, whether we honor our own needs. And I just put an ebook out on healthy needs and why they're so important, and not getting them met is its own form of trauma and really has great impacts on us. So you can have moments where you don't feel confident and still act with self-respect. You're still practicing self-respect. And you can be afraid and still act with self-respect. That's one of the things I like about it. You can be uncertain and still act with self-respect. You just practice it. Because it's treating yourself like someone whose well-being matters. Now, first, let's rule out what self-respect is not. It's not arrogance. It's not selfishness, because when we practice self-respect, we often see the value in respecting others as well. And so therefore, it's not thinking you're better than others or less than, and it's not about getting your way all the time. It is not about entitlement. It's not. Self-respect instead says, I matter too, not more than others and not less than others. It's also. So let's talk about some everyday signs of self-respect. And of course, I'm not going to come up with every single one here, but I want you to think about your own life and how you can find your own examples of either demonstrating self-respect or maybe struggling with that. So one example is leaving conversations that start to become nasty and abusive, and situations too, and not trying to stay and fix it either. Not leaving passive aggressively, but just say, I really don't let people treat me this way, so I'm going to step away. Following through on commitments to yourself. We've talked about this before. Those small, consistent things really matter. Especially what we're learning about trauma, we're understanding the brain needs repetition and consistency, and it needs that over time in order to believe and trust it. So there's no small self-respect thing, in other words, that you can do or not do, because everything in your mind, so everything your brain interprets is really symbolic. Another way is resting when you need rest. You deserve rest when you need it, not when you have to earn it. Asking for what you need, help, space, money, a raise, maybe for other people to do their part. Another everyday sign of self-respect is telling the truth. Telling the truth to yourself and to other people. Things like, no, you really don't have time to help them this weekend, although you'd love to. No, you don't have the extra cash to go to the concert next month, and you're sad to miss it. Yes, you're taking some time off from work to be with your sister who isn't doing well. Or yes, here's some self-honesty. You're trying to keep people happy, and you need to really work on not doing that. Like that telling on yourself, to yourself, and to a safe person is really powerful. Hiding this stuff from ourselves keeps us stuck, and we know that. Another example is respecting your own limits. Like maybe your physical ones, like remember rest we just talked about? Maybe your time and energy. How about your money? How about not tolerating any more chaos, any more immaturity, irresponsibility, or maybe even the limits around what you've outgrown? Like people can be in a different place than you now, and that's okay. Demonstrating self-respect also means not constantly explaining or defending yourself anymore. You don't need to. You don't need to say it one more time to someone who, honestly, probably doesn't choose to hear you because they didn't choose to listen the first couple of times. And when we choose to not listen and take someone seriously, we have consequences, don't we? Well, they do too. So, some everyday red flags that maybe you're not demonstrating self-respect, or it's said in another way, everyday signs of self-disrespect. Maybe constantly overriding your needs or even subverting them and not even paying attention to them. Like not even realizing that you didn't sit down for 3 hours. Or saying yes when you really mean no. Saying yes too quickly is often the culprit here. Know that unless someone is bleeding and it's a medical emergency, you can take your time and you can take a minute. You can say, hey, let me check my calendar. Let me think about it. Let me ask so-and-so first. Another one is staying silent to keep others comfortable. It was interesting. I was at a gathering yesterday and I saw someone do that. And I was like, that's interesting. So we don't even know what they really think or feel because they're just nodding their head and smiling. A hard one is tolerating disrespect repeatedly. I just worked with a relationship and I just watched him just be quiet and absorb her abuse. Of course, I called it out. But until he's ready to call it out and say no more, it'll continue. What we co-sign and enable continues. We know that. And it drives us crazy to watch other people do it. But I want you to think about, are you doing that in very subtle ways somewhere? Are you tolerating disrespect? Not to beat yourself up or judge yourself because, it happened again. Is do you continue to let it happen? So you just put on your ownership list, yep, that's something I got to work on. Maybe I need some help with that. Okay. That's where a support group or a coaching group is really helpful because they're going to lovingly ask you, so how did that go this week? Did you walk away from that toxic situation? What did you allow? Breaking promises to yourself. And these can be tiny because even the tiny ones are really symbolic, guys. Even, let's say you want to get up 10 minutes earlier so you're not scrambling in the morning. Every time you honor that, you show yourself love and respect because that is something you said you wanted, needed. That's what's key. And again, here's what trips people up. It's not about what other people think of that. You're the only one who gets to decide whether that's a worthwhile cause to get up early for. You get to choose. You get to choose and maybe be wrong and then change it or scrap it or tweak it. You get to decide. No one gets to tell you these things, only you. And yes, you might struggle and screw up. We all do. But that doesn't matter. What matters is, but that's even better because then you have data, you have the evidence like we talk about here. That, I don't know if I would do that again. I might do something different. But now you know why, and now you know your what, and now you know your how. And finally, making yourself small. I want to stop here and say, you're not doing this in obvious ways because everyone would see it and we would have tackled it a long time ago. These are very invisible ways that you can make yourself small. Like not saying, hey, that doesn't work for me. Or not even putting your needs out there when someone says, hey, I want to do this weekend. Not expressing your thoughts, feelings, needs, beliefs, or opinions can keep you small because your voice is not in the room. And I love watching people do this work, especially in my coaching group, because I love to see their voice show up in the room finally. And it's an amazing thing to witness. So if this stuff is so important, why is it hard? If it feels hard for you, know that you need to hug yourself and give yourself a lot of love and compassion. Because unfortunately, and those of you who have been listening for a while know this, that is not your fault. Okay? It can feel hard because there's that fear of rejection. Well, that means you were rejected as a child, and you probably never should have been in those ways. But it was hard because you got imprinted on that. When you spoke up, when you were different, when you asked for what you needed, when you set a boundary, you were punished. You were laughed at. Maybe there's the fear of conflict, and we've talked a lot about that here on the show. You know that's not your fault. Kids aren't supposed to be afraid of that unless there's good reason, because mom and dad were screaming, or it was awful, or it wasn't honest, it was shaming. Maybe it was violent. So all that childhood conditioning created all that people-pleasing. Well, it's really hard to people-please and respect yourself. It is, because you're lying to them, you're lying to yourself, you're not putting your truth out there. You're trying to get that approval, and you're trying to keep the peace. Another one that very loving but very codependent and passive-aggressive families do is the guilt. Who do you think you are? No, you can't do that because that's not fair to your sister. If I'm a really unhealthy parent, you can't be happy and successful because that got messed up for me when I was a kid. Like, the guilt comes in many, many flavors and forms. I want you to think back and see if your family operated on guilt. Do you still operate on guilt? Do you do it with your kids? And in many ways, people learned that being good means putting yourself last. Self-sacrifice, putting everyone else first, how selfless and kind you are. And that, unfortunately, is often where self-respect gets lost. It's that fine line, that tightrope we got to walk where, yes, doing for others and helping and not being selfish is admirable. I think so. But you got to balance that with self-love and self-care. So it should never be to your own detriment. That is your litmus test. And that's why self-respect really works with self-trust, I think, because you're going to learn to trust your gut more and more. And that's your internal guidance as to, okay, am I really being selfish here? Or am I putting myself last? Like, what's going on? Or am I doing too much for others? Or am I not doing enough? Where's the balance? So one question I want you to ask yourself is, if I truly respected myself in this current situation, what would I do? Let me repeat that. If I truly respected myself in this situation, what would I do? Actually, I want you to notice what comes up like in the first nanosecond. Was it stuff like, well, what do other people want? Well, what's going to make everyone happy? Well, what avoids discomfort? What would self-respect do? We're not setting out to piss people off or make them uncomfortable. We're not. But just because you're trying to practice some self-respect doesn't mean you're going to harm people. You may hurt their feelings. They may not be used to that. They may not like it. But if you use the tools here on the show where we talk about stay on your side, do an I statement, use empathy, saying, I know you need help this weekend, and I'm so sorry I'm just not able to help you. My shoulder is really hurting. So you're going to do it in a way that is kind and considerate of others and not emotionally reactive, at least not after a while. You may start that way. But it's also honoring what you need. And healthy people will want you to do that. So think about that. What came up for you immediately? Or have you been working on that and you're like, nope, what is that self-respect? Well, self-respect, Mary, would be, I would stay home and clean my house this weekend and find where things are because it's feeling really chaotic and stressful. Self-respect instead would look at, what do I need? Why does it make sense? Why is it valuable? How am I going against myself? In this situation, what are the healthy things? Where are my boundaries? Where's my emotional honesty with myself and them? What do I know I need to do? And what we need to do is often, guys, the hardest thing. It's embracing loss. Maybe that person isn't who we thought they were. So we got to lose and grieve the dream. We got to start over. We have to create anxiety around the unknown. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why that can be hard. But what would be the most respectful thing for you? And if you haven't done it yet, you're not ready yet. But if it's coming up, you're getting ready to be ready. And you might need some love and support around you. And that's what we're going to be talking about this summer. not trying to do it all ourselves. But ironically, focusing more on ourselves might mean we got to reach out for some help. So last week we talked about self-trust. This week we got into self-respect, because healthy relationships, I think, are built on both. And the relationship you have with yourself is no different. Every time you honor your needs, uphold a boundary, even with yourself, tell the truth, or try to act in alignment with your values, I think you send yourself a really powerful message that says, I matter. And that is the foundation of self-respect. So today we talked about how we hear a lot about confidence and self-care and boundaries, but we really got to look at the other piece of the puzzle that often gets overlooked, and the very subtle ways that we either display self-respect or show it, or we don't. And it's one of those qualities that can be really hard to define, and I think, though, it really influences every area of our lives, from our relationships to our choices to the way we see ourselves. So we took a closer look at how self-respect matters and why it matters more than many people realize. So if you ever struggle to speak up, find yourself putting other people first, sometimes at your own expense, or maybe wonder why certain patterns just keep showing up in your life, well, you might want to think about self-respect and self-trust, and continue to join me as we do this summer review series and explore a topic that I think really has the power to change that relationship you have with yourself, and then therefore with everyone around you. Thank you so much for being here today. Be proud of the work you're doing so far. If you do this work, it will get better, it will get healthier, and it will change. Reach out if you need support. Check the show notes for all the programs and sign up for the newsletter. And remember, pay it forward, keep focusing on you, and I'll see you next time.
We hope you took away some useful insights and tools you can begin using right away. If you did, please leave a positive review and share on your social media. Because could you imagine if everyone in your life really got it together? Remember, own it now, so you can really own it later.